street, this one right here, and which is this line that I already drew. Keep in mind it is right above this last tree here, which is why I put it right here. So you can probably put it closer if you want. Okay, and then so that is where the sidewalk ends, this line, and then I'll do another line up here to show the other side of the street, and it just ends up this being, we can make this like the gray or grass as well. So end of the sidewalk, this is the street, this is the other side of the street, and this would be grass or concrete if we wanted to. Okay, all right, so now we're ready for continuing with the shading of the other palm trees, okay, and the other trees. So I'm just gonna go, since I started over here, I'm gonna just continue to this tree, and this tree is pretty dark, the trunk, and when I drew it, this looks a little too straight. It will have some more bumps in it. So I'm gonna take the charcoal stick and fill it in a good amount. Remember I said last class, you can use your finger or fingers when it comes to charcoal, just because it's thicker, it has more substance than if you're using just a regular pencil or a drawing pencil, right? But just be mindful as well on how much pressure you're adding, because you can break through the paper and damage it. Okay. And there's a little bit of a lighter speck on the right side. That's just lighter bark. Then I'm just going to grab the eraser and lighten it up a little bit. Okay. And now go over and do the leaves and branches. So when I'm shading or putting down the values for the branches, the direction in which the branches are going is the way I'm putting down the charcoal. So if I notice that the branches or the leaves are kind of going in a downward motion, I will move my charcoal in that direction to again emulate or mimic the same direction that it is going on the in the image. And remember, there are some light areas on the trees for the branches, so I put a few marks on there, right? And I'm just going in with the with my pencil, or not my pencil, my finger, and kind of spreading out the value. Do you see these little marks here? It's just myself or someone else wrote on top of it so that it carved into the actual paper. So I'm just kind of filling them in with my charcoal pencil. And don't worry if you went a little too dark, we can lighten them up with the erasers in a minute. So if you notice down here, I made a little lighter, and then I'm just going to go in with the eraser and just make some marks to show the difference in values. So when you are shading with charcoal, you're adding and you're taking away, you're adding and you're taking away. Very similar to when you're drawing with pencil, but with pencil you have a little more control. With charcoal, it tends to be a little more loose unless you're working with on a bigger scale. This drawing is much smaller, so we may not have as much control because the charcoal tends to not be in a really tiny point like a pencil is. Okay, so be aware of that. Don't get so hung up on the details when doing this. Okay. All right, I'm going to move on to the next tree, which is this one, and which is this one here. And if you notice on the image, my shadow's a little wide when it comes to the tree itself over here. So I'll make it a little smaller in a minute. Again, I'm taking the stick, the charcoal stick, filling it in a little bit, and then taking my finger and spreading that value throughout the tree trunk. And this one is darker than the one tree we just finished. So I'm adding a little more definition, and this one has like a bump on the left side if you look at it in the picture right here on the left. And it has a little bit of a root coming out on the left, so I'm gonna add that. And then the bottom of it is actually pretty straight. And now I'm gonna make the shadow a little thinner, because in the picture it's thinner than how I drew it. It's almost just like a sliver. And it probably got wider as I was spreading it out with my finger. And we'll connect these two because they actually connect. I'll connect them in a bit. Let me go ahead and continue with the tree now. So again, move the charcoal in the same direction that you see the leaves kind of moving on the tree. Again, to mimic the same motion. So put down a little bit of charcoal on your paper, and then just take your finger and spread it out. Again, I'm moving my finger in the direction in which I see the leaves or the branches kind of moving. The last tree that we're doing, the last tree that we're doing has more white spaces or empty spaces. For example, this one right here, I don't know if you can kind of see it, but not enough, which I'm going to lighten. There's some lighter spots which are here, okay, and those tend to be a little brighter. So I'm just going to take my eraser and put a little more pressure down in it. And now you see those a little more than before, right? And I'm going to add some more white spots on this tree over here on the right, just because you see them right here. There is a white charcoal pencil that you can use, or even chalk works as well, because chalk is basically about the same as white charcoal. That's a little wider or lighter. And then, oh, you know what I didn't add on this last tree? You guys see how it comes over on this palm tree? So I'm going to add more over here. And again, it's going in that like downward direction, the leaves are. It's okay if you, what would you guys say is darker? The leaves from this tree or the tree trunk from this palm tree? Based off the picture that's on the screen. Can you guys tell? The trunk, let's see. Yeah, a little bit, and it's kind of hard to tell just because they're both in the same light. Let's see, I printed out the picture. The trunk is slightly darker than the leaves. Just slightly though, it's almost hard to tell, and we'll do that more when we do the details. So I'm just going to lighten up that a little bit more. Okay. All right. Now keep in mind, I'm also trying to mimic the top of the tree to match the image here. So if you notice, this bump shows up in the image, and then there's another bump just to the right of the palm tree that I went ahead and added. Okay. Hopefully you guys don't have as many of these little marks as I do on my paper. All right, let's continue. I'm just gonna add some more white specks. Alright, let's go over to this other tree. I feel like this other tree, before we get to the bigger palm tree, is going to be maybe the more difficult one, because it has the most different values in it. Okay, so I'm not going to go too dark. I'm going to put this down first. For the tree trunk, this tree trunk is fairly light. I'm going to add the charcoal and then lighten it. And then with my charcoal pencil, I'm going to go and trace the branches. Just slightly, not too much. And make sure they all connect to the tree trunk. And now I'm going to put a few marks for the leaves. Okay. Now I'm just going to go, this is where you can maybe use your stump or your finger. It's up to you. I'm going to use my pinky. Be mindful of what fingers you're using to blend, just so that you don't accidentally use a finger that already has a lot of charcoal if you're doing a lighter area. So I'm literally just going over each spot that I put with charcoal and just dabbing my finger on it to get more value to spread out. Alright. And then if you need to add more, you can. I'm just gonna add a little bit just to define those branches a little bit more. Some are more defined than others. And put a little bit more on the tree trunk. All right. That's pretty good for now. Oh, you know what? I need to carry it over behind the palm tree. It gets a little more dense next to the palm tree. Alright, now we're ready for the palm tree trunk. Whoops. Make sure to stop me if you need me to show you something again. So this tree trunk, the base of it is pretty dark. And then it gets a little lighter. So before I go up, what I'm gonna do is just same thing as how I did with this tree and these other trees. I'm just gonna go up the bark and make some, or up the trunk and make some marks where I see it pretty dark. Now keep in mind the left side of the palm tree, there's a really thin white line on it. that we will add to a lot of these palm trees and trees at the end, because we're just going to end up going over it if we do it now. So again, I'm just mimicking the marks like we did on this palm tree, on this one here. And then going with my finger and just lightly dab it again, because those marks will still stay there, but you will get more values in between those marks and in between the bark. See how that texture still stays there? Alright. And then, oh, you know what we forgot to do, or what I forgot to do, is make it thinner up top. So let me grab my eraser and thin it out so that it looks, so I can see this part, and that should be in here. So let's make it thinner in there. And that one doesn't have the texture because it's just the trunk without the bark on it. And then it gets white again. Right. Put a little bit of charcoal inside. I'm going to grab the stump in this case because my finger is too big. If you have been using the stump, keep in mind the stump makes the charcoal look a little brownish just because of the paper that's in the stump. Alright, now I'm going to go ahead and do the fronds. And I'm just mimicking the lines that the fronds create, and essentially tracing over the lines that I did with the regular pencil. So you should be seeing the similar process with everything. I draw it, or we do the contour drawing of it, right? Once we have all the general shapes and lines that make up the image, then you go over it with the charcoal for the defined lines, and then you start spreading out the values. And then they overlap. So now I'm going to just take my finger, I'm going to go with my pinky. There is such a thing of taking your finger and just, or your hand, and then smearing everything. Obviously, if you do that, you're going to get rid of a lot of details and a lot of defined lines, right? All right, so it's coming along. Let's get in there. Again, trust the process. I'm gonna leave that right now because I want to start filling in the ground and the sky. Okay. Okay, so for the ground, the shadow right here, okay, it kind of connects with all these other ones. So I'm going to add those with the charcoal stick, and then use my finger to get a nice clean value. Now the tree trunks tend to be darker than the shadows, okay? Okay, so be aware of that. The one shadow that's the darkest is this one right here. So this should be the darkest one, which is this one. And I'm just going to take my pencil, the charcoal pencil, and really make it dark. All the other shadows should be slightly lighter compared to this one. So I'm basing all my shadows darkness to this one, which means the one I just did here is should be lighter than this one. So I'm just going to take my eraser, this one, and lightly drag it across just so that it's lighter. Than the one straight that we just did. Okay. So I think on the camera, or what you guys see, it looks the same darkness. On my paper it's actually lighter. And then I'm going to darken some of the tree trunks now. Like this one, this palm tree. This tree trunk is darker. Or should be darker than the shadow. Make it a little wider. And I'm gonna start just adding more of the shadows. So I'm just looking at the picture and adding more of those values where they belong. This tree trunk is pretty dark at the base. Now let's go over to, I'm just gonna put some value in here. It's not supposed to be dark, but it's not supposed to be this light either. This is where you can use the tissue paper to cover more ground. Hopefully you don't make some defined marks. If you do, just grab your eraser like I just did. And even it out. And we're obviously not drawing every single blade of grass. Number one, you can't see the grass, the little blades of grass. So you shouldn't be drawing them, right? One of the common things that sometimes people do with landscapes is they start drawing like little pieces of grass where you can't see it. Yes, it is an impression that we're doing with this, but if you don't have like tall grass or like sticking out, then you shouldn't be drawing it. Okay. All right, the street is darker than the grass, so put a little bit of charcoal where the street is. Take your finger or tissue and spread it out. And it is okay if you go and touch some of the trees. Or the tree trunks. We're doing the street. We're gonna make some white show up at the end with our erasers, and even if you have white charcoal or chalk, chalk works, white chalk works because it's just as dusty as the black charcoal. And it'll blend, or should blend. Alright, now I'm going to clean up that edge of the sidewalk by just grabbing my eraser and erasing and getting a nice clean edge, or cleaner edge along it. So you might be noticing how your drawing is starting to look a little messy. Again, be patient, be mindful. We're going to clean it up as we're doing more and more of this. Okay. Charcoal can be a little frustrating, but hang in there. All right, let's do the sky now. And for the sky, remember we said it's a little darker on the top right, and then the brightest or whitest thing on our paper is going to be the left side of the sky over here. Okay, so I'm just going to put a little bit on the corner, left corner, with my charcoal stick, and then take my tissue. Didn't come out the way I wanted it. So those marks, so be careful. Should have just probably taken the tissue and spread out what was already on my tissue. Yeah. So when I went ahead and put the charcoal on top, it made some marks. So I'm just kind of getting rid of them. And then what I'm going to do is just take the charcoal that's already on my tissue and spread that around. I should have done that in the first place. So that's my bad. Alright, so I'm going to take tissue now. And just the charcoal that's already on my tissue, I'm going to spread it out. And it's okay if you accidentally smear one of your palm trees, because again, we're going to go back and add more details once we put all this value down. Again, I'm really only using the charcoal that's on my tissue. If you have more charcoal on your tissue than I do, obviously be mindful of how much pressure you're applying. And if you want, if you open up your tissue and just rub the charcoal stick on it, that could also work if you have a brand new tissue. And I'm just going to carry it over. And if you went too dark, again, grab your eraser and drag it over. Like this dark area over here on the right. Just lighten it. Not a lot of pressure, just enough. So keep in mind my camera is making my drawing look a little darker than it actually is. And it's also due to the lighting from my room that I'm in. How you guys doing? I feel like I'm doing like a Bob Ross thing where he's just talking to the camera the whole time and no one's interacting with him. Alright, so are you guys watching how it's coming along slowly and surely? Let me move this. There we go. That's a little better in terms of value accuracy. Okay, we have the general basis of everything. I'm just looking at the picture and making sure everything's in the right spot before I start doing major details. So when you look at my drawing, you look at the picture, is anything out of place in terms of a tree, in terms of a shadow, in terms of value? Is there something I should fix in terms of where I put something before I start adding more things or more details? No one? Everything look good? Just going to the shadows now. Wait on what, Matthew? That's going to be the street. Good point. I think that's too dark if you look at the picture. So I'm going to make it lighter. So that is a good point. It looks like a shadow, right? So we need to make it look more like a street. And part of it is because the value is a little too dark. So this street, you would consider it to be more in the middle to background, right? So I'm just making it lighter. There. Anything else that we should change before we start adding more value? Yeah. Okay. Let me actually pause here.